It begins quietly. Not with a dramatic failure. Not with a grand collapse. But with something far more subtle. A thought. A whisper. A quiet, convincing voice that says, "Not today. It's not the right time. I'm too tired. I'll start tomorrow." And so it begins, the silent forging of chains. Chains not made of iron, but of excuses. Invisible to the eye, yet heavier than steel. And before you realize it, you're shackled. Bound by the weight of your own justifications. Unable to move forward, yet fully convinced that one day you will. One day, when things are easier. One day, when motivation magically appears. One day, when life finally slows down and the perfect opportunity lands in your lap. But that day never comes. And deep down, you know it. This is the great tragedy of the human condition, not that people aim too high and miss, but that they aim too low and hit. Worse yet, many never aim at all. They drift. They wait. They stand still, hoping that standing still will somehow lead them somewhere. And all the while, the clock keeps ticking. The question is not whether time is passing. The question is, what are you doing while it does? Most people will spend their lives carefully crafting a story to justify why they didn't build the life they wanted. A perfectly reasonable narrative for why they never started the business, never learned the skill, never pursued the passion, never became the person they once dreamed of being. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the language of these invisible chains. I didn't have the right connections. The economy wasn't good. I was waiting until things settled down. It just wasn't the right season. But history will show you something powerful and undeniable. There have always been people who succeeded despite terrible economies. There have always been people who built empires without connections. There have always been people who rose from poverty, obscurity, and hardship because they refused to accept their excuses as truth. They understood something most never grasped: excuses are seductive lies. They feel good in the moment. They wrap you in comfort. They protect you from the sting of discomfort and the sharp edge of responsibility. But what they cost you is immeasurable. Every excuse you cling to is a brick in the wall separating you from your potential. And each time you justify your inaction, you strengthen that wall, making it higher, thicker, harder to break through. Until one day, you can no longer see over it. You forget what life on the other side even looked like. So how do you break free from these invisible chains? You start by recognizing them for what they are, a self-imposed prison. And like any prison, the door remains locked not by force, but by choice. You must make the hardest decision you will ever make. The decision to take full, unrelenting responsibility for your life. No one is coming to save you. No one is going to hand you the success, fulfillment, or freedom you're waiting for. That is your job. And it begins the moment you stop waiting and start working. You see, life has a simple economy. It does not reward the most deserving. It rewards the most disciplined, the most courageous, the most willing to pay the price in advance before the rewards ever show up. That's why the wealthy, truly wealthy, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually, aren't burdened by the same chains. They traded excuses for execution. They gave up comfort for progress. They understood that you cannot live a life of ease and a life of greatness at the same time. One must be sacrificed for the other. The question is, which will you sacrifice? Because the harsh truth is, comfort is a slow death. It lulls you into a false sense of security while quietly stealing your years. And before you know it, you're standing at the end of your life wondering where it all went. You see, excuses don't just steal your success, they steal your joy. They rob you of the deep satisfaction that only comes from knowing you gave your very best. That you stood at the edge of fear and uncertainty, and you moved forward anyway. That's where fulfillment lives. Not in the absence of struggle, but in the triumph over it. The ones who feel most alive are not the ones who have had the easiest paths. They're the ones who refuse to let their circumstances define them. They're the ones who chose to fight, to build, to become. They are living proof that the life you want is always on the other side of the excuse you're most attached to. And if you're brave enough to face that, everything can change, starting right now. Because you don't need more time. You don't need better circumstances. You need one thing, a decision. A decision to stop negotiating with your excuses. A decision to act, not when it's easy, but because it's hard. A decision to step fully into the reality that this life will give you nothing you haven't earned. And that's the most liberating realization of all, because if you are the one who earns it, no one can ever take it from you. So don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the chains to dissolve on their own. Break them. One bold action at a time. One courageous refusal to believe the same old lies. One undeniable act of responsibility that says, I am done living beneath my potential. And when you do, you will find a freedom greater than anything comfort could ever offer. Because here's the ultimate truth. The life you're capable of living is already waiting, not in the distant future, not locked behind some impossible gate, but just beyond the wall of excuses you've built with your own hands. And understand this, that wall, as strong as it feels, is made of paper, not stone. It looks imposing, it feels permanent, but it's an illusion. One clear, decisive act, taken today, can tear straight through it. But it requires something most people never dare to summon, courage in the moment of decision. Not next week. Not when you feel more confident. Not when the stars align and the voices in your head go silent. Now. Because this is the point where most lives are decided, not in the grand life events, but in the quiet, seemingly ordinary moments where you either choose progress or you choose to remain the same. That's the real battlefield. In the space between I should and I will. In the pause where your mind races with reasons to wait and your soul pleads for you to act. And in that moment, you must decide which voice you will obey. Remember, every excuse feels right in the moment. It feels logical, protective, even responsible. But comfort is a liar. And excuses? Excuses are the silent architects of regret. Listen to the stories of those nearing the end of their lives, and you will hear the haunting echoes of chances not taken, risks not embraced, lives not fully lived. Rarely do they speak of failures with bitterness. Almost always, it is the moments they never tried that sting the most. What if I had started that business? What if I had fought for that relationship? What if I had believed in myself just once, when it mattered most? Those are the echoes of a life lived in the shadow of excuses. But your story is still being written. And this is the turning point. Right now, as you hear these words, you are standing at the invisible line that separates the life you've settled for from the life you're capable of creating. One step forward, and you enter a life of purpose, discipline, and fulfillment. One more step back, and the chains tighten. The wall grows taller. The excuses become more convincing. And if you don't break free now, the risk is that you will spend years, maybe decades, believing the lie that change is no longer possible. But I am here to tell you, with absolute certainty, it is possible. And it begins with one decision. No more excuses. Ever again. From this moment, excuses become unacceptable in the language of your life. From this moment, you trade the comfort of delay for the discomfort of progress. From this moment, you become the kind of person who acts boldly, consistently, without apology. Not perfectly, but relentlessly. Because here is the final lesson you must carry. The chains that hold you are imaginary, but the life you can build is real. Real is the pride you'll feel when you lay your head down at night knowing you gave the day everything you had. Real is the strength you'll build when you show up for yourself, again and again, despite the resistance. Real is the wealth, the health, the love, the peace that will flow into your life, not because you wished for it, but because you worked for it. And when that day comes, and it will come, when you stand tall, unshackled, living the life that once felt impossible, you will smile quietly to yourself, knowing the truth. It was never the world that held you back. It was never your circumstances. It was only ever the excuses you were brave enough to destroy. So rise. Take the first swing at that wall. And never stop until the chains are broken and the life you were born to live is fully, unapologetically yours. Not someday. Not soon. Now. Because freedom starts now.